Russian forces never let up in their offensive. Now they were preparing to launch a new attack into Ukrainian territory. A Russian infantry fighting vehicle advanced onto the battlefield and began firing on Ukrainian positions. They then entered the village and began firing randomly in all directions. The IFV reached its destination and began disembarking the infantry. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone detected approximately 10 soldiers in the area and relayed the information. Afterward, the Russian forces began preparing to attack, gathering all their equipment. The infantrymen took up defensive positions among the ruins of houses. No civilians live here anymore. Ukraine has also withdrawn, and now this village belongs to Russia. However, they were unaware that their activities were still being monitored by Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. After inspecting and clearing the area, the Russian soldiers unloaded weapons, additional ammunition, and equipment, and began strengthening their defensive positions. The Ukrainian drone operator who saw this was not afraid but looked excited. They were ready to face the wave of Russian attacks. It only takes one drone to destroy the building where the Russian soldiers are located. After that, Ukrainian artillery came into action, precisely attacking the houses where Russian infantry were sheltering, guided by targeting from reconnaissance drones. And after that shot, there was no one left there. The Ukrainian command took decisive action. It was time to counterattack and drive the enemy out of the village. The plan was meticulously formulated. For the counterattack, several assault groups were formed. Each group was assigned a specific task. Combat vehicles moved out to the location. They successfully disembarked and engaged the enemy. The Russian army was vastly outnumbered, and the Ukrainian forces were unable to hold them back. To prevent the enemy from finding future cover as they fortified the area, Ukrainian forces threw explosives into houses. The next day, Russian forces launched another attack on a Ukrainian village. The force consisted of a tank and 2 APCs, but the tank in front hit a mine and exploded. The APC carefully moved around the tank to avoid mines and reach the village. To be able to drop off troops, the Russians hoped to gain shelter in the village, so they could then expand their attack. But Ukraine swiftly destroyed the APCs after they deployed their troops. Ukraine has turned this village into an inescapable trap for Russian troops. All armored vehicles entering this village were destroyed by Ukrainian FPV drones. The tank that had previously exploded due to a mine was also destroyed by the FPV drone. Of all the armored vehicles sent by Russia to the village, not a single one returned safely. All were destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Every Russian armored vehicle crossing Ukrainian territory is closely monitored. Drones always have their moment. A mine stops this target. The Ukrainian side is closely monitoring the situation. Several well-placed attacks left Russia no chance. This Russian APC eventually turned into burnt-out scrap metal. Then another APC tried to break through the village. It wanted to test his luck after several other APCs were successfully stopped. Not long after that, a Ukrainian soldier immediately prepared an FPV drone to be flown there. Then, a massive explosion was seen, which caused debris and the APC turret to fly into the air for several meters. One of the APCs managed to drop off the infantry in the building, but it was a trap. The drone operator immediately locks onto the target. An FPV drone then intercepts the target as it tries to flee. The Russian APCs realized they had to get out, but a Ukrainian soldier fires a javelin missile. However, the others managed to get out of there. This Ukrainian soldier changed the situation. That was a precise hit with a mortar. The Russian attack was a complete failure. Meanwhile, the Russian troops who were deployed earlier took shelter in the ruins of buildings. But the thin walls of the destroyed houses could not save their fate. This time, it was the turn of Ukrainian tanks to take on the task of overcoming the Russian troops. With accurate fire, the tank destroyed the Russian hideout. This village is a critical defensive position, and Ukraine will not allow Russia to operate in this area without a fight. Besides tanks, Ukrainian FPV drones also participated in the task of destroying the buildings. Then the final attack was closed, with a Ukrainian soldier firing an RPG-7 missile. The building collapsed from all sides. Russia was helpless. Ukraine currently faces approximately 470,000 Russian troops attacking its positions daily using infantry assault groups. If Ukraine had sufficient artillery, these attacks could be easily repelled, as a few 155mm shells would quickly disable the attackers once they began to move from their positions. However, Ukraine is forced to limit its artillery units to firing only 2,000 rounds per day over a range of 750 miles. Ukraine has deployed approximately 350 artillery pieces, leaving them virtually unavailable in many areas of the Ukrainian front line. Russian troops have also complained of running out of ammunition. However, Ukrainian military commanders say that the supply of Russian artillery shells to frontline units appears to be much more efficient than their own supply. Artillery has caused approximately 80% of casualties on both sides. However, a lack of production capacity in Europe has led to a shortage of artillery ammunition that could be disastrous for Ukraine's war effort. Ammunition shortages are already being felt across the front and have contributed to the recent withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from several cities. Ukrainian frontline troops are facing a shortage of artillery shells and have scaled back some military operations due to a lack of foreign aid. Due to the ammunition shortage, some frontline artillery units are limited to firing once or twice a day. The 59th Motorized Brigade in eastern Ukraine is only allowed to fire 2 rounds at Russian forces per day, compared to 20 or 30 previously. The ammunition shortage comes as the Ukrainian military prepares for a spring counteroffensive. President Zelensky has said that the much-talked-about offensive cannot take place until Ukraine receives more weapons from Western countries that support it. Without adequate ammunition, the Ukrainian military will have to physically occupy more frontline positions to counter Russian small arms attacks. This will increase Ukrainian casualties and reduce the number of personnel that can be moved from the front line to train and prepare for future offensive operations. In short, without artillery ammunition, Ukraine risks being trapped in a permanent defense, slowly surrendering, as has already happened in several regions. However, NATO has conducted its largest military exercise since the beginning of the Cold War, with tens of thousands of troops deployed across Europe in a show of force intended to serve as a warning to Russia following its massive invasion of Ukraine. The exercise, dubbed Dragon 24, is part of the larger Steadfast Defender 24 exercise, NATO's largest since the Cold War. Around 90,000 troops will participate in the exercise, which will run through May and involve more than 50 ships, from aircraft carriers to destroyers, as well as more than 80 fighter jets, helicopters, and drones, and at least 1,100 combat aircraft, including 133 tanks and 533 infantry fighting vehicles. NATO strongly condemns Russia's brutal and unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. NATO and its allies continue to provide unprecedented support to Ukraine, helping it uphold its fundamental right to self-defense. NATO also signed a $1.2 billion contract this week to purchase approximately 220,000 rounds of artillery ammunition. The alliance stated that it would forward the ammunition to Ukraine, which has complained of ammunition shortages, or to member states seeking to replenish dwindling stocks through supplies to Ukrainian forces. NATO is helping Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression by coordinating Ukraine's requests for assistance and supporting allies in the delivery of humanitarian and non-lethal aid. NATO identifies Russia as the most significant and immediate threat to the security of NATO members. Since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022, the United States has provided approximately $75 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, while other NATO allies and partners have provided more than $100 billion. Overall, NATO allies account for 99% of all military aid to Ukraine. Western supply routes to Ukraine are long and tortuous, and frequently targeted by Russian missiles and drones. However, weapons experts say the main problem is that Western military manufacturing bases are unable to produce enough ammunition to support the exhausting war that is now entrenched on static front lines, forcing both armies to revert to artillery, both to protect their positions and to support infantry attacks. If the U.S. agrees to fund Ukraine, the delivery of approximately 1.3 million rounds of ammunition to the country should be possible by 2024. Allowing Ukraine to maintain its position, with European investment to expand production, more supplies could be available by 2025, reaching levels that would allow for Ukrainian offensive operations. However, with Europe still increasing its production capacity, Ukraine will face severe supply shortages in the coming months unless the U.S. takes action. Despite this advantage, Russia's weapons dominance could potentially fade over time. While ammunition production could increase, Russia has so far relied heavily on barrels sourced from the old Soviet storage system. By 2025, these stocks will be depleted, and Russia's capacity to forge barrels will not be sufficient to meet future needs. As a result, by 2025, the accuracy of Russian weapons and the number of available weapons could decline. This could give Ukraine and its supporters hope in the long term. However, the critical question is whether the U.S. is willing to continue this fight into next year before the tide turns in Ukraine's favor.
Внимание, выстрел!